I never expected that a February snowstorm in suburban Minneapolis would turn my quiet life into a legal circus involving my gas meter, a power-hungry HOA president named Brenda, and a utility company with zero patience for nonsense. The first flakes started falling on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and watching the weather forecast predict 8 to 12 inches. I'm Kevin Yates, a 34-year-old software developer who works from home, and I had just settled into my house on Maple Ridge Lane 6 months earlier. The neighborhood seemed perfect when I bought the place. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and what I thought was a reasonable homeowners association. That last part turned out to be spectacularly wrong. By Wednesday afternoon, the snow had piled up exactly as predicted. I spent 2 hours clearing my driveway and the walkway to my front door, creating neat banks of white powder on either side. My gas meter sat on the east side of my house, and I made sure to clear around it too. The utility company had sent out reminders every winter about keeping meters accessible, and I figured it was just common sense anyway. The metal box jutted out from the brick exterior, its digital display visible and its ventilation clear. I was inside making lunch when I heard the distinct rumble of a snowplow. That was odd because the HOA had already sent their contracted service through earlier that morning. I walked to my living room window and saw something that made my blood pressure spike immediately. Brenda Morrison, our HOA president, was driving a small utility vehicle with a plow attachment, and she was deliberately pushing snow from the street directly onto my property. Not just onto my lawn, but in massive, deliberate piles against the side of my house. I watched in disbelief as she made another pass, adding even more snow to the growing mountain. I grabbed my coat and rushed outside. "Brenda, what are you doing?" She stopped the vehicle and climbed out, wearing a puffy purple jacket that matched her self-important expression. Brenda was 52 years old, with bleached blonde hair cut into a severe bob that somehow made her look perpetually angry. She had been HOA president for 3 years, and from what my neighbors told me, she treated the position like she was running a military dictatorship. "I'm redistributing snow in accordance with HOA guidelines," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Your driveway snow removal created an unsightly pile near the street. I'm moving it to a more appropriate location. You just buried my entire side yard, and my gas meter is under there." Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "The HOA has standards, Kevin. When you purchased your home, you agreed to maintain aesthetic compliance. That means not creating eyesores visible from the street. There's nothing in the bylaws about where I can put snow from my own driveway." Section 12, Subsection 4, Paragraph 2 covers visual pollution and property appearance standards. I have the authority to take corrective action when homeowners fail to meet community expectations. I stared at her, wondering if she actually believed this nonsense or if she just enjoyed bullying people. "You can't bury my gas meter. That's a safety issue and probably illegal." "Then you should have thought about proper snow placement before creating that mess." She climbed back into her vehicle. "I expect you to review the HOA guidelines more carefully in the future. Consider this an educational opportunity." She drove off before I could respond, leaving me standing in front of what looked like a miniature mountain range against my house. The pile was at least 4 feet high in places, and I knew my gas meter was somewhere underneath all that compressed snow. I spent the next hour digging. My shoulders ached, my hands were freezing despite my gloves, and I was furious. When I finally uncovered the meter, I saw that snow had been packed so tightly against it that some had actually gotten into the ventilation slats. The digital display was barely visible through a coating of ice. That evening, I sent a formal complaint email to the HOA board. I detailed exactly what Brenda had done, included photos of the snow pile and the buried meter, and cited the actual utility company regulations about keeping meters accessible. I kept my tone professional despite wanting to write something far more colorful. Brenda responded within an hour. Her email was a masterpiece of bureaucratic doublespeak, essentially saying that she had acted within her authority. My complaint was noted but dismissed, and I should focus more energy on being a better community member. She CC'd the entire HOA board, which I later learned consisted of her two best friends who rubber-stamped everything she wanted. The temperature dropped Thursday night. Friday morning, I woke up to discover my heating wasn't working. The house was cold enough that I could see my breath, and when I checked the thermostat, it read 54 degrees. I went outside to check the gas meter and found that it had stopped recording any usage. The display was dark. I called the gas company immediately. The automated system told me the earliest they could send someone was Monday afternoon. I explained it was an emergency, that my heat was completely out, and that my meter had been buried in snow. The customer service representative put me on hold for 10 minutes before coming back with better news. We can have a technician there tomorrow morning between 8 and noon. However, I need to inform you that if the meter access issue was caused by homeowner negligence, there will be a service call fee of $350. The HOA buried my meter. I didn't do it. Do you have documentation of that? I thought about the photos on my phone. Yes, I do. Please have that available for the technician. They'll make the determination about billing responsibility. I spent Friday night in a house that got progressively colder. I piled every blanket I owned on my bed and wore 2 layers of clothes. I kept thinking about Brenda in her oversized house 3 streets over, probably sitting in her warm living room, completely unconcerned about the problem she had caused. Saturday morning arrived with temperatures in the single digits. I was awake at 7, drinking coffee and waiting by the window. The gas company truck pulled up at 8:30, which I considered miraculous given the usual utility company time windows. The technician was a woman in her 40s named Patricia, and she had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had seen every possible variety of human foolishness. She listened to my explanation, looked at the photos on my phone, and examined the meter carefully. "Yeah, this was definitely buried," she said, scraping away some remaining ice. "And not by natural snow accumulation. You can see the compression patterns. Someone used a plow or snow blower to pack this in here. Will my heat work once you get it running? The meter's fine, just frozen. The safety shutoff kicked in because the ventilation was blocked. I'll get you up and running in about 20 minutes. She paused, tapping her tablet. "Now, about the service fee. You said the HOA did this." The HOA president specifically. She was mad about where I put my driveway snow, so she plowed a bunch of snow against my house and buried the meter. Patricia raised her eyebrows. "Do you have proof beyond the photos? Like, did anyone see her do it, or did she admit to it?" I pulled up the email chain on my phone and showed her Brenda's response. Patricia read it carefully, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to something resembling amused satisfaction. "Oh, this is perfect," she said. "She admits to redistributing snow and taking corrective action. That's exactly what I need. Would you be willing to forward this email chain to our billing department?" "Absolutely. But can they actually bill the HOA?" "They can bill whoever was responsible for creating the unsafe condition. We deal with this sometimes with contractors who block meters or landlords who don't maintain access. If we have clear documentation that a third party caused the problem, we can pursue them for the service fee. She handed me a business card. Forward everything to this email address. Include your account number and service call reference number. Our legal department will handle it from there. I felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction. What happens if she refuses to pay? Then it goes to collections, just like any other unpaid bill. And if it gets really messy, we can refuse to provide service to any property where we can't guarantee safe meter access. But that's pretty rare. Usually people pay up once they realize we're serious. Patricia got my heat working again, and the house slowly started warming up. She had me sign some paperwork confirming that I hadn't caused the meter blockage and that I had documentation of the responsible party. Before she left, she said something that stuck with me. I've been doing this job for 18 years. The number of problems caused by HOAs is ridiculous. They think they can do whatever they want because they have a little bit of power, but utility regulations supersede HOA rules every single time. Your president is about to learn that lesson the hard way. After she left, I forwarded the entire email chain, plus all my photos, to the gas company's billing department. Then I sent another email to the HOA board, documenting everything that had happened and making it clear that Brenda's actions had resulted in a service emergency and a $350 fee that the utility company would be pursuing. I stated that I expected the HOA to handle this situation appropriately and to ensure nothing like this happened again. Brenda's response came within 2 hours. It was even more aggressive than her previous email. She accused me of making false claims, insisted she had done nothing wrong, and threatened to fine me for misuse of HOA communication channels for personal grievances. She also claimed that if the gas company contacted her, she would inform them that I was lying and that I had created the snow pile myself. I actually laughed when I read that last part. She clearly had no idea how much documentation I had provided to the utility company, or how little they would care about her alternative version of events. The following Tuesday, I got a call from my neighbor, an older gentleman named Robert who lived 2 houses down. He had been in the neighborhood for 20 years and had watched 4 different HOA presidents come and go. "Kevin, I heard about what happened with your gas meter," he said. "I want you to know that several of us saw Brenda plowing snow against your house. If you need witness statements, I'm happy to provide one." "That might be helpful, actually. The gas company is going after her for the service fee." Robert chuckled. "Good, she's been out of control for years. The rest of us just keep our heads down because it's not worth the hassle, but someone needs to push back eventually. Last summer she tried to fine me for having the wrong shade of mulch in my garden beds. What did you do?" I showed her the receipt proving I'd bought the exact color specified in the HOA guidelines. She backed down, but she wasn't happy about it. The woman has a pathological need to control everything. We talked for a few more minutes, and Robert mentioned that 3 other neighbors had witnessed Brenda's snow plowing adventure. He offered to coordinate witness statements if things escalated. I thanked him and said I'd keep him posted. 2 weeks passed without any word from the gas company. I assumed the wheels of bureaucracy were turning slowly. Then, on a Thursday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brenda standing on my porch, her face red with anger. "You need to call the gas company and tell them you made a mistake," she said without preamble. "They sent me a bill for $350, claiming I damaged your property and created a safety hazard. This is absurd." "It's not absurd. You buried my gas meter and my heat stopped working. I had photos and emails proving you did it. Of course they billed you." I was performing my duties as HOA president. I have immunity for actions taken in an official capacity. I almost laughed. Brenda, that's not how any of this works. You can't violate utility regulations and then claim HOA immunity. You created a dangerous situation. The gas company had to send an emergency technician, and now you're responsible for the cost. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not paying it. Then it goes to collections. Patricia, the technician, explained the whole process to me. Eventually, they can even refuse service to properties you own if you become enough of a problem. Brenda's expression shifted from anger to something uglier. If you don't fix this, I will make your life in this neighborhood miserable. I can fine you for every tiny violation. I can deny any modification requests. I can make sure you regret ever crossing me. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You're new here. You don't understand how things work. I run this HOA and what I say goes. Smart homeowners learn to cooperate. I felt my own anger rising. You buried my gas meter in the middle of winter because you didn't like where I put my driveway snow. My heat stopped working. I spent a night in a freezing house. You caused all of that, and now you're threatening me because there are actually consequences for your actions. No. I'm not calling the gas company. You owe them $350 and you're going to pay it. We'll see about that. She turned and stormed off my porch. I immediately went inside and documented the conversation in an email to the HOA board and to the management company that handled some of the HOA's administrative work. I didn't mention Brenda's threats specifically, but I made it clear that she had come to my home to demand I lie to the utility company about who had caused the meter blockage. The management company representative, a tired-sounding woman named Susan, called me the next day. I received your email, she said. I want you to know that what Brenda did with the snow was not authorized by the management company, and it's not something we would ever recommend. HOA presidents have authority over certain things, but they can't violate utility regulations or create safety hazards. Has she contacted you about the gas company bill? Susan sighed. Yes. She's insisting that the HOA's insurance should cover it, but our insurance doesn't cover acts that violate municipal codes or utility regulations. She's also demanding that we send a letter to the gas company disputing the charge, which we won't do because we have no grounds to dispute it. So what happens now? She needs to pay the bill. If she doesn't, it's her personal problem with the gas company. The HOA isn't liable for her individual actions, especially when those actions exceeded her authority and violated regulations. After we hung up, I felt a bit better. At least the management company wasn't backing Brenda's nonsense. But I also knew that someone like her wouldn't just give up and pay the bill. She was too invested in never admitting she was wrong. I was right. Over the next 3 weeks, Brenda launched what could only be described as a harassment campaign. She sent me violation notices for things that weren't actually violations. My garbage cans being visible from the street for 20 minutes after trash pickup. A small ice patch on my sidewalk that she claimed was a hazard, my porch light supposedly being the wrong color temperature. Each notice came with a threatened $50 fine. I responded to each one with detailed refutations, citing the actual HOA bylaws and including photos proving there was no violation. I also documented everything in regular emails to the HOA board and the management company. Susan started responding with increasingly frustrated messages, making it clear that Brenda was acting outside her authority. Then things got worse. I came home from a grocery store run in mid-March to find a formal HOA violation letter taped to my door. This one claimed I had made unauthorized exterior modifications to my property, by installing a satellite dish. The letter stated I had 7 days to remove the dish or face a $500 fine, with additional daily fines of $50 until compliance was achieved. The problem was that I didn't have a satellite dish. I had never installed one, and there was nothing on my roof or attached to my house that could remotely be described as a dish. I took photos of my entire house exterior, confirming that whatever Brenda was talking about simply didn't exist. I called Susan at the management company. Brenda just issued a violation notice for a satellite dish I don't have. She what? There's no dish. I've never installed one. She's literally making things up now. Susan was quiet for a moment. Kevin, I think you need to file a formal complaint with the HOA board. Not just an email, but an official written complaint requesting a board hearing. This has gone beyond a simple dispute about snow removal. She's harassing you, and the board needs to address it. Will that actually accomplish anything? From what I understand, the other board members always side with her. Maybe, but it creates a paper trail. And honestly, at this point, you might want to consider talking to a lawyer. I'm not supposed to say that in my official capacity, but person to person, what she's doing is crossing lines. If she keeps fabricating violations, you could have grounds for a harassment claim. I thanked Susan and spent that evening researching lawyers who specialized in HOA disputes. The first 3 I contacted were either too expensive or not taking new clients. The fourth, an attorney named Michael Chen, agreed to a consultation for $100. I met with Michael the following Tuesday at his office in downtown Minneapolis. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with an easy confidence that came from knowing his subject matter inside and out. I laid out everything that had happened: the snow incident, the gas meter burial, the utility company bill, and the escalating harassment. Michael listened carefully, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Okay, so the good news is you have an extremely well-documented case. The photos, emails, witness statements, and the utility company documentation create a clear timeline. The bad news is that HOA disputes can get expensive and time-consuming, even when you're clearly in the right. What are my options? The most straightforward path is to continue documenting everything and file formal complaints. Eventually, the HOA board will have to take action, especially if the management company is pushing back on Brenda's behavior. The risk is that this could drag on for months. And the less straightforward path, Michael smiled slightly. You sue. Personal harassment, filing false reports, abuse of authority. With your documentation, you'd have a solid case. The challenge is that it costs money and time, and you have to decide if it's worth it. What would a lawsuit accomplish? Best case, you'd get a restraining order preventing her from continuing the harassment, monetary damages, and possibly her removal from the HOA board. It would also send a message to other board members that they can't let this behavior continue. I thought about it. The idea of dragging this through court was exhausting, but the idea of months or years of Brenda's harassment was worse. Let me think about it, I said. In the meantime, is there anything I should be doing differently? Keep documenting everything. Don't respond emotionally to her provocations. If she shows up at your house again, tell her all communication needs to go through official channels, and consider recording the conversation if Minnesota's recording laws allow it. He paused. Also, has she paid the gas company bill yet? I have no idea. Find out. If she's ignoring it and it's gone to collections, that's additional evidence of her refusing to take responsibility for her actions. I left Michael's office with a lot to think about. That evening, I called the gas company's billing department and asked about the status of the service fee. The representative put me on hold for several minutes before coming back with an answer. The bill was sent to a Brenda Morrison on February 16th. As of today, March 21st, it remains unpaid. It's now past due, and we've sent 2 reminder notices. If it's not paid within 10 days, it will be sent to collections. What happens then? Our collections agency will pursue the debt through standard means: letters, phone calls, and potentially legal action if the amount remains unpaid. Additionally, Miss Morrison's credit report may be affected. I thanked the representative and hung up. Brenda had now had the bill for over a month and was simply refusing to pay it. I wondered if she actually thought she could ignore it forever, or if she was waiting for me to cave and somehow take responsibility for it. The next day, I received another violation notice. This one claimed my lawn had dandelions visible from the street in violation of the HOA's landscaping standards. It was March in Minnesota. There was still snow on parts of my lawn. Dandelions wouldn't even start growing for another month at least. That was when I made my decision. I called Michael Chen and told him I wanted to move forward with legal action. "I can't keep living like this," I said. "She's not going to stop, and the HOA board isn't going to rein her in. If a lawsuit is what it takes, then that's what we'll do." Michael agreed to take the case. His fee was reasonable: $1,500 upfront, plus costs, with additional hourly billing if things went beyond basic filing and negotiation. He assured me that most HOA cases settled before going to trial, especially when one party was so clearly in the wrong. We spent 2 hours going through all my documentation. Michael was impressed by how thorough I had been. He drafted a formal demand letter outlining Brenda's harassment, the fabricated violations, and demanding that all harassment cease immediately. He gave her 10 days to respond before we would file a formal lawsuit. The letter was sent via certified mail on March 25th. Brenda signed for it on March 27th. I knew this because Michael's office tracked the delivery confirmation. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th day, I came home to find my mailbox destroyed. It had been knocked off its post and was lying in my yard, dented and bent. The post itself was cracked. I immediately took photos and called the police to file a report. The officer who responded was a calm, middle-aged man named Officer Daniels. He examined the mailbox, took photos, and asked if I had any idea who might have done it. "I'm in a dispute with the HOA president," I said. "She's been harassing me for over a month. My lawyer just sent her a demand letter a few days ago." Officer Daniels raised his eyebrows. "That's quite a coincidence. You have any evidence linking her to this?" "Not directly. But I have documentation of everything else she's done." I showed him the email chains, violation notices, and photos. He took notes and said he would include everything in his report. He also mentioned that destroying a mailbox was a federal offense since it interfered with mail delivery, and that I should report it to the postal inspector as well. After Officer Daniels left, I called Michael. He was furious. "She's escalating. This is actually good for our case in a legal sense, but it's concerning from a safety perspective. File that postal inspector report and make sure the police report mentions the ongoing harassment pattern." I did both. I also contacted Susan at the management company and sent her photos of the destroyed mailbox along with the police report number. Her response was swift and surprisingly firm. "Kevin, I've discussed your situation with our company's legal counsel. We're formally recommending that the HOA board remove Brenda from her position as president. Her actions are creating significant liability for the association, And we can't continue to manage a community where the president is engaging in illegal harassment. Will the board actually do it? I don't know, but we've put it in writing, and if they refuse, we may terminate our management contract. We're not going to be associated with this situation any longer. That evening, I received an email from one of the other HOA board members, a woman named Margaret who had been Brenda's friend and ally throughout this whole mess. The email was shockingly different in tone from anything I had received before. Kevin, I want you to know that I was not aware of the full extent of Brenda's actions until Susan forwarded your documentation to the entire board today. What has happened is unacceptable, and I am deeply sorry. The board will be meeting this weekend to discuss the situation. I cannot promise specific outcomes, but please know that your concerns are being taken seriously. I forwarded the email to Michael. He replied with a single sentence, "Progress, but don't let your guard down." The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning. I wasn't invited to attend, which was apparently normal for executive sessions. Michael advised me to continue documenting everything but to let the board process play out. Saturday afternoon, I received a call from Margaret. She sounded tired. "Kevin, I wanted to let you know that the board voted to remove Brenda as president, effective immediately. We're also implementing a formal review of all violation notices she's issued in the past 6 months, and will be rescinding any that were inappropriate or fabricated." I felt a wave of relief. Thank you. I appreciate you all taking this seriously. I need to be honest with you. Brenda didn't take it well. She stormed out of the meeting and made some concerning statements. I'd recommend being cautious for the next few weeks. What kind of statements? Margaret hesitated. She said that you had ruined her reputation and that you would regret it. It might have been just emotional venting, but given everything that's happened, I thought you should know. After we hung up, I immediately called Michael and relayed the conversation. He advised me to inform the police about the threats and to consider installing security cameras around my property. I took his advice on both counts. Officer Daniels came by again that evening to take my statement about Brenda's threats. He mentioned that they still hadn't identified who destroyed my mailbox, but that they were keeping the case open. I got the sense he suspected Brenda, but didn't have enough evidence to pursue charges. I spent Sunday installing a doorbell camera and 2 additional cameras covering my driveway and the side of my house where the gas meter was located. The whole system cost $400, but it seemed like a worthwhile investment. Monday morning, I was working from home when my doorbell camera alerted me to motion on my porch. I pulled up the app on my phone and saw Brenda standing at my door. She wasn't ringing the bell, just standing there staring at the camera. I grabbed my phone and stepped into the foyer but didn't open the door. Through the wood, I heard her voice. "I know you're in there, Kevin. We need to talk. Any communication needs to go through official channels," I called back. "My lawyer has advised me not to speak with you directly." "Your lawyer?" She spat the words like they were poison. "You've destroyed everything I've worked for. 3 years as president, maintaining standards, keeping this neighborhood respectable, and you've ruined it with your lies and your vindictive complaints. I documented what you did." There were no lies. I was doing my job. You couldn't handle a simple snow removal issue, so you turned it into this enormous drama. And now the board has betrayed me, the management company has turned on me, and I'm being billed for things that weren't my fault. You buried my gas meter. You filed fake violation notices. You showed up at my house to threaten me. Those were all your choices. There was silence for a moment. Then Brenda's voice came back, lower and angrier. "You haven't paid that gas company bill yet, have you?" I froze. "What? The $350? You haven't actually paid it. I called them. They told me the bill was for emergency service to your address, but that it was being charged to me because of your false claims. If you would just call them and admit you lied, this would all go away. I'm not calling them because I didn't lie. You need to leave my property, Brenda. Not until you agree to fix this. I pulled up the doorbell camera app and started recording. I'm recording this conversation. You need to leave my property immediately or I'm calling the police. You can't tell me what to do. I dialed 911 on my phone. When the dispatcher answered, I explained that someone I had a restraining order request filed against was on my property refusing to leave. That wasn't technically true yet, since Michael hadn't filed the paperwork, but it got the point across. The dispatcher said they would send an officer immediately. I stayed in my foyer, listening to Brenda mutter angrily on the other side of the door. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, I heard a police siren approaching. Officer Daniels arrived, which I considered good luck since he was already familiar with the situation. I opened my door and stepped out onto the porch. Brenda was standing on my walkway, her face red with anger. "Madam, I need you to step away from this property," Officer Daniels said firmly. "He's lying about me. He's destroyed my reputation. That's a civil matter. Right now, you're on his property and he's asked you to leave. If you refuse, I'll have to arrest you for trespassing." Brenda looked between me and Officer Daniels, clearly trying to decide if she could talk her way out of this. Finally, she turned and walked toward her car, which was parked on the street. But before she got in, she turned back. "This isn't over, Kevin. You're going to pay for what you've done." Officer Daniels stepped forward. "Madam, that sounded like a threat. I'm going to need to see your ID." What followed was 20 minutes of Officer Daniels taking statements, reviewing the doorbell camera footage, and documenting Brenda's threat. He was incredibly professional, but I could see his patience wearing thin as Brenda alternated between playing the victim and making veiled additional threats. Finally, he issued her a formal warning. If she came onto my property again or made any further contact with me, she would be arrested. He also mentioned that the destroyed mailbox investigation was still open, and that he would be adding this incident to that case file. After Brenda left and Officer Daniels finished his report, he pulled me aside. "Mr. Yates, I've been a cop for 19 years, and I've dealt with a lot of HOA disputes. Most of them are petty nonsense that doesn't involve law enforcement, but this woman is escalating in a way that concerns me. The destroyed mailbox, showing up at your house multiple times, the threats. This is heading somewhere bad. What should I do? Keep documenting everything, which you're already doing. The cameras were a good call, and seriously consider that restraining order your lawyer mentioned. Right now, I can only respond after she does something. A restraining order gives us more tools to prevent things from happening in the first place." I thanked him and went back inside. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline. I had never been in a situation like this before. I wrote software, lived quietly, and generally avoided conflict. Now, I had a former HOA president making threats on my doorway while a police officer documented everything. I called Michael immediately and described what had happened. He listened quietly, then said we needed to accelerate the legal timeline. I was going to wait until the demand letter deadline passed, but given that she's now making threats in front of a police officer, we need to file for an emergency restraining order. I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. We spent an hour on the phone, going through everything I would need to provide. Michael said he would file the restraining order petition first thing Tuesday morning, and that there would be a hearing within a week or two. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me check the camera feeds on my phone. I kept expecting to see Brenda creeping around my property, doing who knows what. But the night passed without incident. Tuesday morning, Michael filed the restraining order petition with Hennepin County Court. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, March 9th. Brenda would be served with notice of the hearing and the temporary restrictions later that day. I tried to focus on work, but my concentration was shot. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Around 2 in the afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Yates, this is Denise from the collections department at Midwest Utilities. I'm calling about the unpaid service fee related to your account." My stomach dropped. I thought that bill was being sent to Brenda Morrison. It was. However, Miss Morrison has disputed the charge, claiming that you are responsible for the snow accumulation that blocked your meter. Our legal department reviewed the documentation, and were confident in our original determination that Miss Morrison is liable. However, the dispute has delayed the collections process. What does that mean for me? Nothing, as long as our determination stands. But I wanted to inform you that Miss Morrison's dispute included claims that you have falsified evidence and that you should be held liable for the fee plus additional damages. Our legal team is reviewing those claims now. After I hung up, I felt a new wave of frustration. Brenda was now trying to turn the gas company against me, claiming I had falsified evidence. It was absurd, but I knew from experience that absurd claims could still cause real problems. I forwarded the information to Michael, who assured me that the gas company had all the evidence they needed and that Brenda's dispute was unlikely to go anywhere. But he also noted that it showed she was willing to lie explicitly in official documents, which would help our case. The rest of the week passed in tense anticipation. I worked from home, monitored my cameras obsessively, and tried to maintain some semblance of normal life. My neighbors had started to notice something was wrong. Robert stopped by Wednesday evening with a casserole and some moral support. "The whole street knows what's happening," he said. "Brenda's been telling everyone who'll listen that you're a vindictive liar who's trying to destroy her, but most people know better. She's burned too many bridges over the years." "Has she done anything like this to anyone else?" Robert nodded. "About 2 years ago, she went after a family 3 streets over because their teenage daughter's car was supposedly parked illegally on the street. She called the police multiple times, filed violation reports, made their lives hell for months. They eventually moved. Why didn't anyone stop her? Most people just want a quiet life. Fighting the HOA president is exhausting, even when you're right. You're the first person who's actually pushed back hard enough to make a difference." On Monday morning, I dressed in business casual clothes and drove to the Hennepin County Courthouse for the restraining order hearing. Michael met me in the lobby, carrying a thick folder of documentation. We went through security and made our way to the family court section where the hearing was scheduled. Brenda was already there, sitting on a bench in the hallway. She was wearing a professional-looking dress and had her hair carefully styled. She glared at me as we walked past, but didn't say anything. The hearing itself was relatively quick. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judge Kathleen Morrison, reviewed the petition and the supporting documentation. Michael presented our case efficiently. The pattern of harassment, the fabricated violations, the destroyed mailbox, the threats, and the incident on my porch. Brenda represented herself. She argued that she had been performing her duties as HOA president, that I was overreacting to standard enforcement actions, and that any incidents had been blown out of proportion by my vindictive nature. Judge Morrison listened to both sides without expression. Then she asked Brenda a simple question. "Miss Morrison, Did you plow snow against Mr. Yates' house that resulted in his gas meter being buried? Brenda hesitated. I redistributed snow that he had placed inappropriately near the street. It's my job to maintain community standards. Did you have authority to plow snow onto his property in a way that blocked a utility meter? The HOA bylaws give me discretion in enforcement matters. That's not what I asked. Did you have specific authority to block a utility meter? I didn't intend to block the meter. Judge Morrison looked down at the documents in front of her. But you did block it, and when Mr. Yates informed you of the problem, you dismissed his concerns. Is that correct? He was being difficult. The entire situation could have been avoided if he had just followed the guidelines. The judge made some notes. Then she looked up. I'm granting a temporary restraining order. Miss Morrison, you are to have no contact with Mr. Yates. You are not to go to his property. You are not to contact him electronically, by phone, by mail, or through third parties. You are not to file any HOA violations against him. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Brenda's face went white. Your Honor, I'm a board member of the HOA. I can't simply not have any contact with one of the homeowners. Then you need to resign from the board. This harassment has been extensive and well documented. You're lucky I'm not ordering a full hearing on additional sanctions. She turned to Michael. Counselor, file a motion if there are any violations of this order. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing on a permanent order. We left the courtroom with the temporary restraining order in hand. Brenda left through a different exit, her expression a mixture of rage and humiliation. Michael was satisfied but cautious. This is a good outcome, but it doesn't mean she'll stop. Restraining orders are only as effective as the person's willingness to follow them. Keep documenting everything and call the police immediately if she violates the order. Over the next 2 weeks, things were surprisingly quiet. I didn't see Brenda, didn't receive any violation notices, and started to relax slightly. The HOA board had elected a new president, a reasonable man named David, who immediately sent out a letter to all homeowners apologizing for the recent turmoil and promising a return to sensible governance. Then, on a Thursday evening in early April, my doorbell camera alerted me to activity on my porch. I pulled up the feed expecting to see a delivery driver. Instead, I saw Brenda, once again standing at my door. I immediately called 911. While I waited for the police, I watched the camera feed. Brenda wasn't trying to knock or ring the bell. She was just standing there, staring at the camera. It was unsettling in a way that was hard to articulate. 2 police officers arrived within 10 minutes. One of them was Officer Daniels. The other was a younger woman I hadn't met before. They approached Brenda, who immediately started talking. I couldn't hear what she was saying through the camera, but I could see her gesturing animatedly. Officer Daniels remained calm, showing her something on his phone, presumably the restraining order. The conversation continued for several minutes. Finally, Officer Daniels turned toward my door and knocked. I opened it. Mr. Yates, miss. Morrison claims she's here to deliver an official HOA document that requires hand delivery. She says that constitutes official business exempt from the restraining order. She's not on the HOA board anymore. She has no official capacity. Brenda shouted from where she was standing with the other officer. I'm still a homeowner. I have a right to participate in community governance. Judge Morrison's order was very clear. No contact means no contact, regardless of the excuse. I looked at Officer Daniels. She's violating the restraining order, he nodded. That's my assessment as well. He turned to his partner. We need to take her in. What followed was a scene I never expected to witness. Brenda argued, loudly claimed she was being persecuted, and even tried to push past the officers to get to my door. They ended up handcuffing her and placing her in the back of their squad car while she screamed about injustice and conspiracy. Officer Daniels came back to my door. "We're arresting her for violating the restraining order. You'll need to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. The county attorney will decide whether to file charges. What happens to her now? She'll be booked, and there'll be a bail hearing, probably tomorrow. Given that this is her first arrest and it's a restraining order violation, she'll likely be released on bail with additional conditions." After they left, I sat in my living room feeling surreal. A woman had just been arrested on my porch because she couldn't stop herself from harassing me over a snow dispute that had happened 2 months ago. The whole situation felt like it had spiraled far beyond anything I could have imagined. I called Michael and updated him. He was pleased but not surprised. People like Brenda have a hard time accepting consequences. She probably convinced herself that she was exempt from the restraining order because she had some kind of official reason to contact you. But legally, that doesn't matter. The judge said no contact, and that means no contact. The next morning, I went to the police station and gave my statement. The officer taking my report mentioned that Brenda had been released on bail with additional conditions. She had to stay at least 500 feet from my property at all times, and she was explicitly forbidden from any HOA business relating to my address. That afternoon, I received a call from David, the new HOA president. "Kevin, I wanted to inform you that the board has officially expelled Brenda from the HOA board completely. She's no longer even a general member of the board in any capacity. Additionally, we've reviewed every violation notice issued in the past year, and we've rescinded 17 of them as being inappropriate or lacking proper basis. Were any of them to me? All 6 of the notices you received have been rescinded. There will be no fines, and we've sent a formal letter of apology. I'm deeply sorry for everything that's happened. This isn't what an HOA is supposed to be." I thanked David and hung up. It felt like things were finally moving in the right direction. The restraining order was in place, Brenda had been arrested, the HOA had cleaned house, and maybe my life could return to normal. Then I got a call from Denise at the gas company collections department. "Mr. Yates, I wanted to update you on the status of the disputed service fee. Miss Morrison has paid the $350 in full. However, because the bill was significantly past due and went through collections, she was also charged late fees and collection costs. Her total payment was $645. I felt a savage satisfaction at that. Brenda's stubbornness had cost her almost double what she would have paid if she had just taken responsibility from the beginning. "Is there anything else you need from me?" I asked. "No, your account is clear. The matter is closed on our end." I will note that our legal department was preparing to file a lawsuit if she hadn't paid. She made the payment about 2 hours after she was released from jail. After that call, I allowed myself to feel cautiously optimistic. The gas company had been paid, Brenda was facing criminal charges, and the HOA had been cleaned up. Maybe the worst was over. The following week, I had the permanent restraining order hearing. Michael had prepared thoroughly, with updated documentation including the arrest report and evidence of Brenda's continued harassment even after the temporary order. Brenda showed up with a lawyer this time, a harried-looking man who seemed to know he was fighting a losing battle. Judge Morrison reviewed everything and granted a permanent restraining order valid for 2 years. She also imposed additional conditions. Brenda was required to have no involvement in any HOA matters concerning my property. She had to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from my home at all times, and she was forbidden from discussing me on social media or in any public forums. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that some of these conditions were overly broad, but the judge shut him down. Your client has engaged in months of harassment, violated a temporary restraining order within weeks of it being issued, and was arrested as a result. These conditions are appropriate and necessary. If Miss Morrison had exercised even basic judgment at any point in this process, we wouldn't be here. The criminal charges for violating the restraining order resulted in a plea deal. Brenda pled guilty to a misdemeanor, received 6 months of probation, a $500 fine, and was ordered to complete an anger management course. Her lawyer managed to keep her out of jail, but the conviction would be on her record. Through all of this, the gas company had completed their own processes. I received a final letter from their legal department confirming that the matter was fully resolved, that I was not liable for any costs, and thanking me for my cooperation in providing documentation. By May, things had finally settled into something resembling normal. My cameras stayed up, more out of general security than specific fear of Brenda. The HOA sent out monthly newsletters that were actually reasonable and informative, without any ridiculous violation threats. David proved to be a competent president who focused on actual community improvements rather than petty enforcement. I ran into Robert at the neighborhood hardware store one Saturday afternoon. He grinned when he saw me. "You've become something of a legend on Maple Ridge Lane," he said. The guy who finally stood up to the HOA tyrant and won. I'm not sure I'd call it winning. It was exhausting, but necessary. Brenda needed to face consequences, and you made that happen. The whole neighborhood is better for it. I thought about that conversation as I drove home. In a weird way, Robert was right. The situation had been terrible while it was happening, but it had resulted in real positive change. The HOA was now functioning the way it was supposed to, as a reasonable organization focused on maintaining property values and community standards, not as a vehicle for one person's power trips. As summer arrived, I noticed something interesting. Brenda had put her house on the market. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she was moving to a different suburb, somewhere without an HOA. The irony was not lost on anyone. Her house sold quickly, and by July she was gone. I never saw her again, and honestly, that was perfectly fine with me. The restraining order would remain in effect for another 1.5 years, but it seemed unlikely I would need it. One evening in late August, I was sitting on my back deck enjoying the warm weather when my phone rang. It was Michael Chen. "Kevin, I wanted to let you know that we received a settlement offer from Brenda's homeowner's insurance." "Settlement offer for what?" "We filed a civil suit 6 months ago for harassment and emotional distress, remember? Her insurance company has been fighting it, but they've apparently decided it's cheaper to settle than to go to trial." I had honestly forgotten about the civil suit. Michael had filed it as a matter of principle, but I hadn't expected anything to come of it. How much? $15,000. It's not a huge amount, but combined with your legal fees, it's reasonable compensation for what you went through. I thought about it for a moment. $15,000 wouldn't change my life, but it was a clear acknowledgement that Brenda's actions had been wrong and had caused real harm. "I'll take it," I said. The settlement was finalized in September. After legal fees and costs, I netted about $11,000. I used some of it to replace my mailbox with a much sturdier model that would be harder to destroy. The rest went into savings. As October arrived and the leaves started changing color, I found myself reflecting on the whole bizarre experience. It had started with a simple snowstorm and a petty HOA president who couldn't let go of a minor dispute. It had escalated into arrests, lawsuits, restraining orders, and eventually a complete restructuring of how our HOA operated. The lesson, if there was one, was that documentation and persistence mattered. If I hadn't taken photos, saved emails, and consistently stood up for myself, Brenda would probably still be running the HOA like her personal fiefdom. Other homeowners would still be living in fear of arbitrary violations and petty enforcement. Instead, our neighborhood was genuinely better. The HOA focused on things that actually mattered: maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and addressing legitimate property issues. David and the new board members treated homeowners like adults rather than subjects to be controlled. I still see Officer Daniels occasionally. He patrols our area regularly, and we've developed a friendly rapport. He told me that in all his years of dealing with HOA disputes, he had never seen one escalate quite so dramatically or resolve quite so definitively. Most of them just fizzle out when people move or give up, he said. What you did, holding someone accountable all the way through the legal process, that's rare. It takes time and money and emotional energy that most people don't want to invest. As winter approached again and the first snowflakes started falling, I found myself watching the weather forecast with mild amusement rather than anxiety. I had a new snow blower, my driveway clearing strategy was solid, and most importantly, I had an HOA that actually functioned properly. The gas meter on the side of my house remained clear and accessible, just as it was supposed to be. The utility company had sent me a thank you letter at one point, mentioning that my documentation had helped them establish clear policies about billing responsibility when third parties created meter access issues. Apparently, my case had become something of a reference point in their legal department. In December, the neighborhood held a holiday party organized by the HOA. It was the first one in 3 years, apparently because Brenda had always vetoed them as unnecessary expenses. The party was actually fun, a casual gathering where neighbors could chat and enjoy the season without any underlying tension or fear of arbitrary rule enforcement. Robert pulled me aside at one point during the party. You know, before all this happened, people avoided HOA meetings like the plague. They were just Brenda lecturing us about violations and standards. Last month, we had the highest attendance in 5 years because people actually wanted to participate. That's what an HOA should be, I said. A way for neighbors to work together, not a dictatorship. As the party wound down and I walked back to my house through the gently falling snow, I thought about how strange it was that such a ridiculous situation had led to such positive outcomes. A vindictive HOA president had tried to punish me for a perceived violation that wasn't actually a violation. She had buried my gas meter, ignored the consequences, and then spent months harassing me when I dared to hold her accountable. But every action she took had been documented, every threat recorded, every violation preserved. When pushed into a corner, I had refused to back down, even when it would have been easier to just move or accept the harassment. That persistence had paid off in ways I hadn't expected. The criminal conviction, the restraining order, the civil settlement, and most importantly, the reform of our HOA all stemmed from that one February morning when Brenda decided to plow snow against my house. She had been so certain of her authority, so convinced that she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. She had been spectacularly wrong. As I unlocked my front door and stepped into my warm house, I looked back at the gas meter on the side of the exterior wall. It was clear, visible, and functioning perfectly. That stupid utility box had become the symbol of everything that had happened. A simple, necessary piece of equipment that someone had tried to bury, and the long process of uncovering it and holding people accountable. The final irony came in late January, almost exactly a year after the whole mess had started. I received a letter from the gas company's customer service department. It was a form letter thanking me for being a valued customer and informing me that based on my payment history and account standing, I was being offered a discount on my monthly service fees. The discount was small, only about $15 a month. But it felt like the perfect closing note to the whole saga. The gas company that Brenda had tried to manipulate into billing me for her mistake was now rewarding me for being a responsible customer. I saved that letter in the same folder where I kept all the documentation from the dispute. It was a thick folder now, full of emails, photos, police reports, court documents, and settlement agreements. I kept it not because I expected to need it again, but as a reminder that standing up for yourself mattered, even when it was difficult and exhausting. The snow continued falling that evening, accumulating on my driveway and yard just like it had a year earlier. But this time, I knew exactly where I would pile it, and I knew that no one would bury my gas meter in retaliation. The HOA would function normally. My neighbors would clear their own driveways, and if any actual violations occurred, they would be handled reasonably by people acting in good faith. That was all I had ever wanted, to live in my house, follow reasonable rules, and be left alone to enjoy my life. It seemed like such a simple expectation, but it had taken months of conflict and stress to achieve. Looking back, I would have preferred to avoid the whole situation entirely. But given that it had happened, I was glad I had seen it through. Brenda had learned that HOA authority had limits, and that abusing that authority carried real consequences. The neighborhood had learned that standing up to unreasonable enforcement was possible and could lead to positive change. And I had learned that documentation, persistence, and a willingness to endure temporary discomfort could ultimately create lasting improvements. As I sat in my living room that evening, warm and comfortable while snow piled up outside, I thought about the $350 service fee that had started everything. Brenda had refused to pay it out of sheer stubbornness, convinced that she could outlast me or somehow force me to accept responsibility for her actions. That refusal had cost her hundreds more in late fees and collection costs, legal fees for the criminal case, insurance premium increases from the civil settlement, and ultimately her position in the community and her home itself. All of that because she couldn't admit she had been wrong about pushing snow against someone's house. The utility company's bill sat paid and closed in their system. The gas meter continued recording my usage accurately. My heat worked perfectly. And somewhere in a different suburb, Brenda Morrison was presumably learning to live without the power she had wielded so carelessly for so long. Sometimes justice moved slowly, and sometimes it required more effort than seemed fair. But in the end, it was possible to hold people accountable, even when they held positions of authority in small community organizations. The system worked when you engaged with it properly, documented everything, and refused to be intimidated. That was the real lesson of the whole experience. Not that HOAs were inherently bad, or that all HOA presidents were tyrants, but that any organization could be corrupted by the wrong person in charge, and that fixing those problems required someone willing to stand up and push back. I had been that person, somewhat reluctantly, because the alternative was accepting months or years of harassment. And while I wouldn't want to repeat the experience, I was genuinely glad it had happened the way it did. The neighborhood was better, the HOA functioned properly, and I could shovel my driveway without worrying about petty retaliation. As winter deepened and the anniversary of that first snowstorm passed, life continued in its normal rhythm. I worked from home, maintained my property, participated in reasonable HOA activities, and enjoyed living in a community that actually felt like a community rather than an authoritarian microstate. The cameras stayed up, monitoring my property not out of fear but out of general prudence. The gas meter remained clear and accessible. The mailbox stood sturdy and undamaged. And every month, the gas company automatically deducted their slightly discounted fee from my account, a small reminder that doing things the right way had benefits beyond just moral satisfaction. That was my story of how an HOA president pushed snow against my gas meter, how the utility company billed her for the service call, and how that single act of petty vindictiveness ultimately led to her removal from power, criminal charges, civil liability, and lasting reform in our neighborhood association. It was more complicated and frustrating than it needed to be, but in the end, accountability prevailed, and the community was better for it.